start a little series about this game that I play called Kerbal Space Program, and we'll see where we go. So we're going to start a science-based career mode, so there will be no money, but it's all going to be based on science. We're going to try and attempt throughout the course of the series to colonize all the planets and moon in the Kerbal system, and most importantly, there's going to be no quick saves, or at least not quick saves that enable us to revert back. So this means if I muck up, if I go wrong, then it goes wrong. It's as simple as that, and yes, that means Kerbals will die. As you can see, it's going to be a science-based career mode, so we're going to have infinite amount of money to be able to play with, and we're just going to knock together a quick little ship to start us off. Obviously, we're starting right at the bottom of the tech tree, and all we need is a very basic little ship that's going to get us a little bit of science, just get us a little bit more rocketry here. So what we've got here is a nice little simple quick thing, and important things to note here: always check your staging. Always check your staging, and yeah, not do what I did there, which was tie the parachute to the booster on the staging, which meant that when I launched, I also activated the parachute at the same time. And yeah, it didn't go very far. Not even a kilometre into the air on that solid little rocket booster, but still, it was high enough to be able to get some science, and yeah, in the name of science, that's what we need to be able to progress it a little bit further, so we could actually go with what we got there and actually do a little bit more. So going through the science tech tree, this is going to be the full science tree that we've got to fill. This is using the Interstellar mod, which I've played with before. I absolutely love Interstellar just because of all the additions of nuclear reactors that are built into it, and nuclear engines, and all the explosive fun that you end up having with those as well, and trying to make sure that you keep the heat down. So the next stage ship I went for, with we're calling this series the New Frontier ships. Two-stage rocket, obviously with solid booster at the bottom, and then a small little tank in the top there. Now, the second rocket is not really intended to try and get into space either, just like the first one, just trying to get up as high as we can. I really wasn't happy with trying to actually get into space just yet because we haven't got the heat shields yet, and without the heat shields it's going to be very difficult to bring the capsules back down without them burning up in the atmosphere and killing Kerbals along the way. And though, yes, I said Kerbals are going to die probably along the line because there's no quick save, do try not to kill them along the way. But here we go, it's building up quite a nice bit of height, and we activate that small little engine. It doesn't get us very far, but it's just a little bit extra. And you can see I'm turning over slightly here, even though we're not going into orbit. The idea here was just to basically make sure we can get it over the ocean. As you can see, there is two science modules on the top there, not just one. And there's also this extra science module at the bottom. So we'll pick up a bit of extra science from while we were up here, and then we're also able to pick up a little bit from the ocean as well once we land. So it just gives us that little extra bit more science that we can use for the next time that we're going into it. And so we're just floating over the ocean there, perfectly aimed. Well, say perfectly. I don't really tend to use too much sciencey stuff on it. One thing I did notice here is that for some reason it decided it was going to flip around as we were coming back down and basically head down like a speeding bullet. Yes, you can even see these sort of supersonic effects coming off there as it's descending at a rapid speed, but thankfully it still manages to slow down. But it was a sort of couple of heart-stopping moments there, thinking, uh-oh, are we going to be able to slow down enough for the parachute? But yes, we're able to pull the parachute, but yet it still remains upside down and won't flip the right way around. So getting even more worrying. And if you've been playing Kerbal, you'll know in some of the more recent versions and everything else, originally back in the beta it used to be about 500 feet when the parachute opened, but now it's 1,000. For some reason there, it didn't open until we were just above 500. Bit odd. But no, that brings us back down to Kerbal again, back down to its ocean, not far off the second airstrip that's over there. Just jump down, let Jeff come out for a bit of a swim, and I'm quite liking, this is 1.1 version of Kerbal Space Program, which is a nice version of the game itself. They've redone it all on the Unity 5 engine, so some of the interface looks a little bit different to what it was before. They've tried to keep it as close to what it was before, but you can certainly know if you've been playing the older versions and then you jump to 1.1 or above and you start noticing that some of the bits are a little bit different on there. And it's just got this slightly different feel, but it's not too bad. We do notice a couple of little bugs that have creeped in there, and when saying use 1.1, I'm actually using 1.1 1.3, which is the very latest version. And there's still a couple of little bugs that possibly need to be worked out, as you'll probably notice as we go through the series here. So we've got a bit of science now. We can possibly get enough. Yes, we've got heat shields. So with the heat shields, and also looks like we're going to be looking at what we're going to be looking at next. But with the heat shields, that enables us to actually be able to safely, hopefully safely, bring back a ship from orbit. So we'll go and chuck the heat shield on, and then we'll aim to build this time a ship that will take us straight into orbit, or at least try and attempt to get as close as we can to orbit, if not into space. Otherwise we'll try and get into space and be able to get some science there. But yeah, as you can see there, I was playing around with the science packs there, and they're sort of thinking, well, which way around do we want to put it, and do we want just one on the back, and what? And then in a minute, you'll see I changed my mind on that one. But there's also something I've added here is you've got drogue chutes, which in the latest versions they're now lower down on the science tree, so that you get to them much quicker. Never really, when I used to play it before, never used to really use the drogue chutes. Always used to rely on the main chutes. They used to seem to do the job on their own. But I've noticed more of lately that I've had a few more heart-stopping moments bringing ships back down just on normal parachutes. So the drogue chutes, which can open up at a faster speed, faster descent speed, are really handy, and it's just to give you that enough braking so that you can activate the main parachutes. And so we've started using them a lot more often. As you can see here, building up well, it's going to be a 3-stage rocket, though these fuel tanks are quite tiny, so I try not to use too many of them, because otherwise you start getting all sorts of forces breaking onto them and everything, especially as we haven't got anything to reinforce it, like Kerbal Space Tape, i.e. the struts. And something else I start using a lot more often since they've been introduced is these little cargo bays. Great for tucking away little science experiments and keep them out away from the ship and the exterior of the ship itself. And really good for getting you through the atmosphere without them sort of causing all sorts of drag and weight issues. You can just tuck them away quite nice and safely. So this is going to be the new Frontier Mark III. And you chuck a few fins on there. They're not really fantastic at this level, but those 4 thumper solid rocket boosters on the side there, now that's the kind of thing we need to be able to push us up. And for some odd reason, we started to get a bit of a spin in here. Now, as I said, these fins aren't particularly effective at keeping you straight, and we haven't had the reaction wheels yet, so the only reaction wheel we've got running on this is in that little tiny module at the top there, and so we've started spinning through the atmosphere, which is a bit disconcerting, making Jeb there a little bit dizzy inside of the ship, but heading on up, and nice bit of explosion there as well. That's what we want, but the ship's still safe, and we're able to continue on further up. So onto the second stage, punching up through the atmosphere. And now you may be aware, you can see I'm not doing much of a turnover at this stage. I do start doing a bit of a turnover. I normally do turnovers after about 30,000 meters. I know you listen to many of the other people on YouTube, you watch many of the other great channels that are out there, and people do their turnovers a bit earlier, start turning towards orbit much sooner. I generally tend to find that I have less problems when I'm above 30,000, dropping parts of the rockets off when you're at an angle. And beneath 30,000, if you start dropping rockets off and you're at an angle, they start colliding with the rocket itself, and then you have to start introducing additional things that can blast the extra rockets off to the side. And so it's just easier just to go straight up like that and then turn over and go straight into the orbit. So heading towards orbit, and not quite make it this time. But again, we're still using those tiny fuel tanks, so maybe with that we can get some good science while we're up here, which will enable us to open up a couple more bits on the tech tree, and enable us to get possibly towards more closer to orbit on the next one. So that we are just jettisoning the back bit there. One of the things I try to do when jettisoning engine parts just before entry is to try and blast them off to the side. As one of the other goals that wasn't mentioned on there that I'm going to try and do for this series is try and keep my space clean. Because I've played so many versions of Kerbal where I've ended up with just hideous amounts of space junk orbiting around Kerbin and around various other planetary bodies, and you just discarded rocket parts. So I'm going to do my utmost best to keep it nice and clean and make sure that anything I jettison all comes back down to Kerbin or is dumped on a planet somewhere but isn't left floating around in orbit, which is something that we should really be doing around the orbit of Earth because we have a real big problem with space junk at the moment here on Earth. And there we go, just bringing this back down, quite routine, made its way through the atmosphere quite nicely. One thing I always worry about when coming down through the atmosphere as well is that we've just got enough electrical energy on board to keep the SAS running as we're descending through and being able to keep the ship straight. And especially at this early stage, we've got no batteries, we've got no way of generating electricity on board, so it is possible that if you get it wrong, you run out of electricity and the ship starts to tumble, then things start going bang and exploding. There we go, so that's another one landed there, and I think we've got enough here to attempt to build a ship that's going to get us into orbit. So there we got better tanks now, put on the side there. We'll just do a couple of little improvements around the edge there, and we'll try and make it up into orbit. So off we go. And again, much better. No spinning this time. Slightly better. Straight up. Turn to the side. And let's see, can any of you spot the mistake I've made? Yes. I made a little bit of an error here. So we jettison the back. And, oh. Lost the other engine. Yeah, I tied the jettison part at the top there to the engine on the staging on the side there, which just meant that I just ended up dumping the engine that I needed to get me into orbit. What did I say on the first flight? Always check your staging. Yeah, guess who didn't? So back down again, got a little bit more extra science, that's good. So I was able to get a little bit more on the tech tree, get myself some thermometers so we can get a bit more science, and then straight back in. And we'll just make a little bit of improvements, add those thermometers, and also got batteries now as well, which also helps deal with that issue I was talking a moment ago about making sure you've got enough electrical energy when you're getting back in through the atmosphere. Just get it all lined up, get a little bit more science while we're on the ground, and then blast off, and hopefully on this one, this would be a sufficient rocket to do it. So there's 4 solid rocket boosters pushing us up incredible speeds upwards. I love the way you can get these effects when going up. Not the most efficient way to launch technically, because that's actually a sign of the atmosphere dragging against your ship, but it does the job. It gets us up there. We can check it all out, check the maneuvers, and then we can just position ourselves around to be able to try and get a nice orbit while we're at the top of it. So we'll just angle over, jump onto the waypoint, and it's very handy being able to just automatically point toward the waypoint. Some people might think it's cheating, considering the older version of Kerbal where you'd have to do it all manually, and you just blast towards the horizon and hope that you make it into orbit. But I like the fact that we can just chuck a waypoint on there and set ourselves towards it there. And so heading off towards the horizon there, lose the first engine, and this time got the staging correct. It enables us to activate the second engine and just push ourselves a bit more towards the horizon there. And any minute now, we're going to get, there we go, into orbit. So let's expand it out. Not the prettiest of orbits, but it is quite a low-tech ship, and the intention was just to get up there, produce the orbit there, and then just be able to get it again. A couple bit more bits of science. Don't know why I was checking that. I got that on the ground while I was down there, because there was no point in getting any more science from up in the orbit, because I've already got that. But yeah, just going to check what little bits we can, get some science off the thermometers. That's going to be our biggest gain on science on this flight. And you may notice there's a couple of little bits of glitching on the video as well. That's to do with my video editor, so I will try to get that sorted throughout the series as we go on. But I think that's everything that we need on there. We just check with Jeb inside there, see if there's anything that he can pick up. No, so there's a case of just jump outside the ship, have a quick look around. Nothing you can pick up there, we got it all there, and then it's just going to be a case of then just a couple of laps around, victory laps around Kerbin itself, as you can see here, just to say we've done a natural lap, not just that you got into orbit and then blasted straight down. So we go down around a couple of times, and then we'll just bring it back down to the ground. Now, over the next coming series, I'm going to go and continue to explore. This is just literally getting us from the ground up into space, and in the next part we will go from where we are with what limited tech we have, and try and make at least an orbit of the moon, or the mun, as it is in Kerbal, and bring the ship back with some more science. So that's going to be coming up in stage 2, but it'll be coming back down into the atmosphere. And you can see here, I'm just using up the last of my fuel just to slow my descent a little bit. It's not absolutely necessary, but I sometimes find it helpful, and you might as well use the fuel up because it's going to be wasted anyway. So if you can just slow your descent a little bit before you hit the atmosphere, it just gives you a little bit of an easier time when you're coming through. And also just make sure you tops up your electricity before you go. And you see I just flicked off to the side and flicked to the side. And the reason I flick it to the side, not straight ahead of me or behind me, like I used to do, I used to either eject it behind me or inject it in front of me, is you get those hairy moments where it suddenly comes racing back towards your ship and you're like, we're going to crash. So pushing it to the side, just make sure it's well away from the ship before you actually go through the atmosphere, then end up with a collision while you're coming back in through an atmospheric re-entry. And straight down, just check all of the bits and pieces, and then maybe just let Jev out for another swim again. There we are. And that will be the end of this episode here. So that's 5 flights on this one up into orbit. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who can do it in less. It might even be possible to do it on just the first beginning tech, and that could be an interesting challenge to do sometime. But for the time being, that gets us starting off quite nicely, and we'll see you next time on episode 2 of the series about DrakenSpaceWerks going off into Kerbal space.